So, you're interested in business. Your whole life you spent daydreaming about becoming a rich CEO of a conglomerate with a wide reach and many, many subsidiaries. The harsh world of business interested you, and the lavish and luxurious lifestyle drew you in. You go to school, study hard, and when you graduate and don't know what industry to turn to, you see the booming explosion of K-pop and decide you want to take part in that too. So, you buckle down, take out a hefty loan, and get started on your plan. But there's just one issue. You're broke and have absolutely zero influence on the scene. You're stuck building your company from the ground up with little to no help at all. Running out of money, you do the best that you can do with what little time you have, determined to make this work. What do? Where do you turn to? How do you make this work? Buckle your seatbelts, travelers, because this is the Marketing Strategies of Nugu Kpop groups. Let's assume you already have your group all picked out. After countless hours of auditions and many hard decisions, you have found a group of young, promising individuals willing to fight for their dreams as well as your own. Where do you go from there? Without money or influence, you're kind of stuck at the drawing board, and unless you just happen to have a secret history of dance or singing in your hands, you and your group are kind of stuck trying to make things work on your own. One thing I've kind of had to come to terms with recently is the fact that a lot of small companies don't have people actively working with their idols. It makes sense thinking back on it. These people aren't doing this for free, and it can take a lot of work to build a vocalist or dancer from the ground up, which means putting a lot of money into it along the way as well. What should have been common sense came as a bit of a shock to me the other day when I was watching Blinky's variety show that they did earlier this year. In one of the episodes, they brought in some well-known vocal trainers and dance coaches to watch the boys perform before their debut. While this sounds like a pretty normal thing for a company to do for their group, something one of them said after Donghyuk's performance made me think. He was asked how long he had been practicing singing, and he responded saying that he only started earlier this year, just a few months.
보컬 혹시 배운 지 얼마나 됐어요? 보컬 교육을 받은 거.
제대로 배운 거는 올해.
그죠? 맞죠? 그러니까 보컬 수업을 많이 배운 거 같지 않아.
Likely started when he joined the company. And while that wouldn't have been shocking for most of the other members of this group, considering they were a pre-debut group at the time, Donghyuk actually debuted with Inoue all the way back in 2019, which means he's been an idol for basically 4 years now, while only just now being taught how to properly sing and dance. This basically just means that a lot of these smaller idols are either getting their training from outside these companies on their own, or just straight up going without it. It's expected, yet very interesting in an industry that is known for being quote-unquote manufactured. Saving on money means cutting back on these things, and for at least the first little bit of their careers, your idols aren't going to have the best training unless they're getting it themselves. After the shocking reality hits you of what little influence you have on the scene, you realize that you're going to have to make your own way if you want to do anything at all. You're going to have to get creative, but make sure you don't go too far off the deep end, otherwise you'll outcast your group from the industry as a whole. The goal is to be different enough to make people pay attention, but fitting in enough that you're not forcing yourself into one specific niche. Two of my favorite examples of this is ateez and dreamcatcher. Dreamcatcher kind of backed themselves into a corner earlier on in their careers. They create this concept and sound that's so niche it became difficult for people not already invested in the style and genre to become interested. Though they did manage to stand out, they stuck out a bit too much, and not only did they back themselves into this niche of a horror rock concept, but also outcasted themselves from the industry as a whole for being, well, different. It's why only now that they've had a small shift in concept and sound that they're finally being recognized as an actual competitor on the scene and not just a group with a horror concept. ateez, however, figured this out from the very beginning. Their music and stylings really isn't that different from other groups doing the same thing, but with their attention to detail, they've managed to make their own way and have managed to stand out just enough to become a point of conversation. One of my favorite examples of this is actually something I think they've talked about a little, and is their decision to call Hongjoong the captain instead of the leader. It's the small things like this that grab people's attention and make them a slightly more intricate group to talk about. This is something you're going to have to master here. Unless some crazy overnight success story happens to your group, you're stuck doing things the hard way. Unless... Though it isn't the recommended tactic, a good standout concept or well laid out lore could be a good idea as well if portrayed decently and is something truly unique. This does come with its drawbacks though. It's something that you have to stick to and it doesn't come with much chance of deviation from this topic. Much like Dreamcatcher, who took their concept to heart, you're going to have to do the same. But here, it's going to have to be a lot more specific and it should start with a plan in mind from start to finish. You don't get the luxury of shedding your skin halfway through like they did. It's a dangerous path, but if done well, it does have potential. Kingdom is a great example of this. A group who have built their entire identity on each of their 7 members portraying an ancient king. There's a lot to their lore, so I won't get into it, but so far they have stuck to it pretty well, and at the very least, it does make them a standout group. The key here is that they've stuck to it so heavily that it has become their whole identity. It's both a drawback and a great way to promote a group, and a group like Kingdom likely wouldn't have half the attention they have today if it wasn't for their lore. Another group that relies heavily on their concept is onlyoneof. While Libido kind of elevated them thanks to just pure shock factor and tends to be the only thing that they're really known for now, their lore actually goes way, way deeper than that. And I'm almost willing to bet Libido and what came with it was written in their future from the very beginning. If I understood religion at all, I could probably do a whole video on their lore, but I don't, and sadly there are like no explanations or theories of it before Libido, so I'm just gonna have to set you on a general track here and say that their lore is nearly entirely based on different kinds of religion, or more specifically, the taboos of it. Libido seems to peel back the more hidden qualities of the lore and delve straight into it, though in general I'd say their lore is quite shocking and unusual in general, and while shock factor isn't always the way to go, it seems to have worked for them decently as well. So while these methods aren't recommended, they are out there for you to use, though a healthy combination of these things, like what Dreamcatcher and ateez have mastered, is likely going to be your best bet. Now that you have the group's concept established, you have to start looking for songs that suit them. But you soon realize that music is quite expensive, and without the luxury of hiring out producers or buying songs that specifically match your group's image and sound, you're left just drifting around hoping for a good song to fall into your lap. If given the chance though, one of these 3 choices is going to be your best bet for creating a consistent and high quality sound for your group. Working with a main producer or producing team is important to keep up with your group's sound when you don't have money for other famous producers. Letting the same person or group of people work with the artist time and time again will create this, though it is important to use other producers when you can, that way your music doesn't become stale. This could be done by having an idol in the group that is capable of producing themselves. There are a lot of idol producers out there, even more so in smaller groups, because without them, a lot of these groups likely wouldn't be able to produce music at all. Eungjae, a member of the group imfact, produced nearly all of their music since he debuted at 16, and looking at the absolute wasteland their company was during the time that they were active, even their limited activities seemed to be due to the fact that they were able to produce music for cheap using one of the members. Now this will save you and your company a lot of money, and will also create a cohesive sound for the group since only one person's expertise will be involved. Unfortunately though, this just isn't always an option. So your other choice is finding a producer that's willing to stick with your group for the foreseeable future, as well as build a unique sound for them. Some groups choose to do this using other artists under their company, like ateez and their producing team. Using a mashup of the group's own inclusions, as well as artists like Eden and Maddox from their company, was a great way to jumpstart their careers, and now that they have some solid footing under their feet, they've branched off into other directions as well. These producers don't necessarily have to be directly related with the company either. Ghost9 works almost exclusively with the producing group Papermaker, and while other producers do help out from time to time, at least one of the Papermaker guys are on nearly all of their tracks this far, and it has created this very outstanding sound for the group, leaning more into the sci-fi futuristic side of things, and not forgetting to add that touch of cosmic beauty in between. Onlyoneof did this as well in the earlier days, with Napler, a music producer, as well as singer-songwriter haeil being heavily involved with their music to this day. This is what created this really smooth, perfect R&B influence for the group, and what has kept the music sounding so cohesive this far as well. Having a well-defined sound for your group will be important for creating a solid fanbase and a successful career. Using any of the above resources, assuming that they are at your disposal, will be a huge benefit in the long run and something important to pay attention to. Last but certainly not least, you're going to need your group to form a relationship with the audience. While this is important for any group, a smaller group is going to have more opportunities to interact with fans one-on-one, and it is important to allow this to happen while still keeping the idols safe. This can be done in a lot of ways, though one of my favorite and admittedly quite funny examples is Purplebeck. Before the group debuted, they were so interactive with their fans on social media that people actually thought they were a social project of sorts and weren't going to actually debut. Giving these idols the freedom to truly interact with their fans can not only lead to some great and memorable moments for both the fan, but also the entire fan base. VIV in particular are known for having a great time with their fans at concerts and fan meets, and is arguably one of the reasons why they're still around today. Parasocial relationships can be seen as a bit of a bad thing, though they are important to keep up as a K-pop group, and if you're worried about seeming superficial, there are of course other ways to go about doing this. Idols Eunjae and Raekwon created their own company last year and called it the Faker Club, and while both of them already have some fans due to their prior endeavors in imfact and Big Star, the way they get their fans to interact not only with them but with society as a whole is quite interesting. Earlier this year, they hosted an exhibit that fans could pay to enter, and even sold a photo album filled with pictures of them as well as their other friends and artists. People like Moonbin, Sinbi, Honeyj, Jokwan, Fieldog, and even more were featured in this book, and a lot of them, as well as others, came to the exhibition. All of the proceeds they made from this were donated to suicide awareness charities and even some families affiliated with them. Not only was this just a great cause, but it was also a great way to interact with the fans and get their name out there through other more popular artists. You could argue that they aren't exactly idols anymore, and them being the masterminds behind this is a bit different than a K-pop group merely showing up to something like this. Doing something similar is a great way to create these relationships as well as stand out doing it. This will absolutely be the backbone to your group's career and will need to be something your group needs to master. The more freedom they have, the more likely people are to pay attention. And that is the secret to the marketing strategies of the Nugus. There are exceptions to every rule, and more often than not, the out-of-left-field success stories are the ones that are talked about the most, but if you want a safe way that is only like 50% reliant on luck, this is the way to go. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching, I really hope you enjoyed, and as always, I will see you next time, travelers.